All right, folks. Welcome to back to the class, and today we're going to talk a little bit about socialization and self-development, the development of the self, and this is going to lead into also consideration of how we develop and change over the lifespan. Okay, so some of this is going to be a bit review from the intro to social class, and just as I've talked about, already this semester. That's okay. I mean, we want to once again establish that framework, that groundwork of understanding, and then we'll build from there. So when we think about socialization, we're talking about the well, I've got a definition here. All right, the lifelong process by which we develop human potential and understand culture. Okay. Notice it says lifeline. It's not lifeline. That's a misprint. It's supposed to be the lifelong process of developing human potential and learning culture. So, a big part of the development of the self is understanding how we fit into society and how society impacts us. Not everybody understands that, but we're studying that, right? So, the point about it being lifelong is, you're not born with your personality. You're not born with who you are. It's something you learn over time. And it's something that doesn't end after first grade, or it doesn't end after you turn 21. It's through the life cycles from cradle to grave, right? Entire lifespan. And so the varied social experiences we have are fundamental to who we are. However good those social experiences are, or if they're bad, okay? We're a product of our social experiences. Okay, so some of you have had psychology class. We've talked about this, right? Nature versus nurture. And again, we're going to take into account the importance of biology for the development of the self. But, we like to think in sociology and social psychology that it's a complex interplay of nature and nurture. The brain doesn't develop. You might remember covering this in the intro to sociology. The brain can be damaged, frankly, at an early age if the individual doesn't have proper interaction with other people. We find from time to time that people that have lived in isolation, and especially for young people, if not exposed to interaction with others and social experiences, you can be fed food and grow your body, but if you don't have the food of social experience, then there's going to be developmental delays, and in some cases, biological damage, brain damage. And that's kind of a weird thing for people to think about. Oftentimes when we think about brain damage, we think about a blow to the head, or something, a medical condition that have caused damage to the brain. But how is it that a lack of social experience, again, because we're not getting that stimulation, a lack of social experience can lead to brain damage. Again, especially for young people, okay? Okay, so let's move on and let's focus on a few things here. And again, the three major theoretical perspectives in sociological social psychology, that social structure and personality, a focus on groups and how groups impact who we are, and then the symbolic interactionist approach. And that's what we're going to focus on a little bit here at the outset in George Herbert Mead, right? So the development of the self, Mead sees that as the product of social experience over a lifetime. And I want to focus a little bit more on the idea of the development of the I and the me. Okay, and you're going to see this in your book. But I want to talk about this a little bit because I think talking about it can help you better understand. And I will tell you that it's taken me a long time to get a handle on this, right? Many years. And I feel I have a good understanding of it after studying it for quite some time. But so what do we mean by the I and the me? So the self is composed of the I and the me, okay? And think of this as the I is kind of like the individual, and the me is the individual in society. And so we are a combination of that. So if you think about that the self, is the product of social experience, it's not just what I experience by myself, it's how I am experienced in society with other people. Now, looking above the I and the me, you're going to see there it says taking the role of the other. So part of our ability to interact with other people is to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. And in the process of putting ourselves in the shoes of other people, we also learn not only about them, but we also learn a little bit about ourselves, about what it means to be human relative to somebody else, but also in the course of an interaction with another person, when we put ourselves in their shoes, we also start to interpret how they see us. And that affects the me. So think of the me as an object, right? And I am the object of other people. Okay, I interact with them, but when I interact with them, I understand more about me. So the I is not exclusive. The me is not exclusive. The me develops in relation to the I, and the I develops in relation to the me. That's what we mean by being a product of society. It's not just what I do as an individual, because what I do as an individual is not in isolation. If it is in isolation, then I don't have the development of a self. Remember, humans are social creatures. Okay, and that's a really important point to note. Some people think that they're a self-made man kind of a thing. Well, you don't develop without, some interaction and connection of relationship to society, to the various components of society, okay? And on that note about components of society, right? So we could think about how family impacts us at a very young age. But what about the rest of society? And it affects us in different ways, right? So we're going to back up, and I want to talk about two terms here, all right? We're going to talk about significant others and a generalized other, okay? And a lot of what we're going to talk about going forward is, this content is central to that, okay? So when we think about significant others, we think about people that have special importance for socialization. So in the life of a young person, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on, parents are obviously very important. Maybe brothers and sisters, maybe grandparents, maybe a guardian, and especially for young people. Now again, young people can't feed themselves, so they rely on somebody, not a robot, but they rely on somebody to help them get nourishment. Think about social experience that way. It's the food of life, okay? The food of life, not just food to help me grow biologically, but social experience to help me develop my identity and myself. Then we get into the generalized other, okay? Widespread cultural norms and values we use as a reference in evaluating ourselves. We're not even talking about people then. And that's what I want to kind of focus on, the difference between, this is kind of like the I and the me a little bit, okay? But the difference between people that we know and how they impact us, who we are, but how does society at large impact us? And how do we interact with people that we don't know, okay? And to do that, I am going to pull up the trap, this behind me. Now I'm going to erase this first. I'm going to jump up, and I am going to erase it, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. So let me do this. I'm going to go over this. And try to put things in context here a little bit, okay? So, significant others, right? So we're going to put significant others over here. Significant others. Who are people that have special importance to socialization? People that you have a direct contact with. And again, we've already mentioned this, but you think about family, and specifically there may be members of the family that have special influence on how you developed as a young person. So whether it's parents, whether it's siblings, extended family, okay? So we know who significant others are. Now, as we get older, friends are important, maybe mentors, maybe somebody you work with over your life has an influence on how you view what it means to be an employee, okay? Or maybe sometimes people in the church are really important to individuals and how they understand their spirituality and their connection to God or what have you, right? Or other mentors might be at play here, okay? So significant others, and then we want to mention here the generalized other on this side. Now, we're talking about widespread cultural norms, but another way to think about this is strangers. And here's the question that I'm going to pose to you. Is it possible to know someone that you've never met? Well, yeah, it is. Especially if you look at their pictures and that sort of thing. If you look at stuff that they've written or whatever. But think even beyond that, okay? When you go out into society, is it possible for you to know people that you come in contact with and you've never had a conversation with? So, what we're getting at here is this continuum, right? So we know these people. We know them really well. And we have, probably a specific relationship with these people. So, I have a kind of relationship with my spouse. I have a kind of relationship with my oldest daughter, with my middle daughter, my son, my youngest daughter. I have a kind of relationship with my mother and my father. And those are really keys to how I see myself and where I get emotional fulfillment, particularly, right? Well, these people matter even though they're not close to us, okay? And here's why. Think of this as strangers, but think of it as society as well, right? So how do we move people, just for purposes of thinking about this, how do we move people from here to here, right? You think about it. How do we treat strangers? How do you interact with someone that you don't know? So if you encounter somebody, you're only interacting with them, especially if you don't ever, we're talking about not talking to them, right? But you interact with people that you don't know very well, and it's very general interaction. You see them in the restaurant, or maybe in the grocery store, or maybe in the place that you work, you deal with the public. And there's a way that we interact with strangers. We've learned that, right? If we do come in close contact, we may say hello. Okay, so there's one way of breaking down the notion of a stranger, right? When you start interacting with them in some form, you may just look at them and give a nod of your head, right? It's kind of hard to do with masks. I've noticed that. It's kind of hard to say hi when people can't see your mouth, right? But anyway, so let's say you say hi or hello, right? And then you can begin to think of how do you get from here to here. And it includes a number of interactions. You start developing common interests. Maybe you start doing things together. Next thing you know, you're married, for an example, right? But again, what about this side of the equation? Who are these people? Do they matter? Well, again, they're society. And we interact with people every day that are not these people, right? And these people are important because they represent society, but they may be providing things to us or for us that help us to be who we are. So, for example, and I've talked about this in a number of my classes, you may not know the names of the people that put the food on the shelf in the grocery store. And they may be strangers, but are they important? You may not know people in the various departments that work at the college, but you expect that they're going to do their job to help you get enrolled or to get financial aid or to get textbooks and that sort of thing. We rely on these people to help us live our lives. And in some ways, become a very important part of their identity or your identity. So, for example, when I eat, there are certain kinds of foods that I want that I really expect to be at Kroger. And again, I don't know who those people are, but I certainly rely on them to help me, be who I am or how I see myself in terms of the food that I eat or whatever, right? So the generalized other and the significant other. This is going to play a part as we think about, again, social position, status, and role. How do these things, like your boss that you've never met, certainly not a good friend of yours, but certainly this plays a role in the kind of work that you're going to do, okay? We're going to get more into this as we go forward, okay? Maybe not directly, but at least indirectly, okay? But taking the role of the other, whether it's significant others, which are really important to how we see ourselves and our identity, but how do these people over here help us understand ourselves as well, okay? All right, so on that note, we're going to stop right there, and I will come back to you again with some more information soon. So thank you for your time and attention, and see you soon.